Time now to take another look at what's been grabbing headlines around the world. And Solange Mougin is back with us here in the studio for the latest press review. Solange, you're starting off with how the press is covering the US Vice President's visit to Guatemala.
Yeah, and as the Guatemalan paper Prensa Libre tells us on its front page, corruption and migration were the two main themes of Kamala Harris's visit to the country. The paper goes in depth into the optimism expressed by the U.S. Vice President. She hopes to boost trade and investment in the country, but Prensa Libre also discusses the challenges that such efforts face, namely political dysfunction and corruption. Meanwhile, the New York Times, they're focusing today on Harris's message to migrants. The vice president simply said, "Do not come," and the Times argues that Guatemala is actually an ideal place for the U.S. to rethink its migration policy, because statistically, many Guatemalans migrants compared to other countries, well, they actually want to return home. They are not, the paper says, chasing an American dream, but rather a Guatemalan one, where for economic reasons they need to go to the U.S. to earn enough money to return to Guatemala and have a good life.
Let's turn now to some health and science news with the approval of a new Alzheimer's drug.
Yeah, it is the first time in 20 years that an Alzheimer's drug has been approved, and the Daily Express says it is a fresh hope and a game changer on its front page, saying that this could slow the ravages of the disease. Now, this optimism is also found in today's Wall Street Journal. Its editorial board hails the hope that it is giving to millions of people, but also the fact that it has been approved despite a quote-unquote twisted path, and the paper calls it a pressure from the public health left. There we go. Now, what are they talking about? Well, according to Science magazine, the drug unfortunately may not work. It takes us through how it was approved despite conflicting evidence from clinical trials that it may not actually be able to slow cognitive decline. Now, for some, the approval, the paper says, is welcome news, but for others, it is, quote, a dangerous weakening of FDA standards.
To some French news now, Solange, involving one of the main figures of French politics today, and that man is called Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Yeah, and I need to give some context here for those who do not know who Jean-Luc Mélenchon is. He is the radical left leader of France's Insoumise party, and he's coming in right now in fourth place in the polls in France and in as the number one candidate on the left. Now, he's currently in the midst of a controversy that's not going down well for him, because he's been spilling, according to the conservative paper Le Figaro, ideas that are actually conspiracy theories. That's their view. Now, what has happened? Well, Mélenchon said in an interview that before every election, there is an event that creates blame towards Muslims. He said that these events, like the jihadist Mohammed Merah's killing spree in 2012, are, quote, written in advance, that someone is essentially pulling the strings. Now, Mélenchon's team is now nervously backpedaling from those comments, according to Mediapart, saying that the leader has been misunderstood. Now, amidst the backlash, L'Opinion says Mélenchon's camp is now turning to its favorite target to sort of make this go away, i.e. the media. The Illustrator has him discussing with his spokesperson, Mélenchon, saying, "See, the media are promoting my worst enemy." "Who's that?" says Alexis Corbière, to which Mélenchon replies, "Me, as in I am my worst enemy." Now, Coco, the illustrator of Libération, also has Mélenchon navel-gazing in a cartoon entitled "Who's Pulling the Strings?" You have him as a puppet saying, "I don't need anyone but me to pull my own strings."
Well, in 7 months' time, France will take the helm of the rotating EU Council presidency, and Solange, already the government is making some linguistic plans for that big day.
Yes, it is, or rather I should say, ben oui, bien sûr. The French government has big plans to push the French language when it takes over the presidency next January. And Politico tells us that they want to make sure that all key meetings are in French, that notes and debates will be in French first rather than in English. English. Now, some diplomats see this push as sort of French haughtiness and nostalgia for a time when French was the language of diplomats. But Politico tells us that other countries have done it before as well, but perhaps not as extensively. Nonetheless, the site says that there is a concerted effort with financing to boot to make sure that French is still used by diplomats today and to ensure that the next generation of civil servants can reply oui when asked, parlez-vous français?
And finally, Solange, you found an article that may make female drinkers happy.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily talking about alcohol here. Tea and coffee apply as well, for we all know that when you have something to drink, eventually you're going to have to use the ladies' room. And that can pose a problem when you are in public, because finding a toilet for women is often a challenge. Well, The Guardian tells us 2 designers may have found a solution. It's a carousel-shaped urinal, you see it there, and it's called Peequal. Why Peequal? Well, qual as in equality. Because the paper tells us that on average in the UK, women spend 34 times longer waiting to use public toilets than men. And this new compact urinal for women could be a solution to sort of equaling the numbers of urinals there are for women. Right now, it is 10 to 1. There are 10 times more urinals for men than women. And so this Peequal may change that. Let's hope so.
Let's hope so indeed. Solange Mouzin with a press review. Thank you very much. I'm back after the break with more world news. Do stay with us here on France 24.